She was invited to her billionaire ex's husband holiday gala, and arrived in an $800 million private jet with the twins he never knew existed. Part 2. The file on my laptop screen made my blood run cold. Government surveillance contracts worth billions. Classified operations using our encryption algorithm, the very technology we created to protect privacy, not destroy it. I slammed the laptop shut as Alexander walked into my office at Harlow Institute, his smile fading when he saw my face. "You promised me you'd changed," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Arya, whatever you found, our algorithm is being used to spy on people, Alexander. The exact opposite of everything we believed in. Was this your plan all along? Build my trust, bring me into the company, make me complicit?" His face went pale. "There are things about these contracts you don't understand." "Then explain them to me," I challenged. "Explain how the man who claims to regret betraying me 16 years ago has been using our work to betray everyone else." Behind us, the door opened. Ethan and Mira stood frozen in the doorway, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern as they witnessed the confrontation between the parents they'd only just begun to trust as a unit. "Thank you for helping Mr. Arden's Heart Stories reach 400 subscribers. Your support means everything as we continue to share stories that remind us how complicated trust can be, especially with those who've hurt us before. Please share this video right now with anyone who understands that second chances come with responsibility, and that some secrets can destroy even the most hopeful new beginnings. Have you ever given someone your trust only to discover they might not deserve it? Or found yourself wondering if people truly change, or just become better at hiding who they really are? This story is about the fine line between forgiveness and foolishness, and what happens when the past isn't quite as buried as we thought. By the end, you'll see that sometimes the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong, it's between two different kinds of right, with the hearts of those you love hanging in the balance. 6 months after our life-changing trip to Aspen, I still found myself startled by how quickly our family dynamics had shifted. The cream-colored invitation that had arrived on that ordinary Tuesday had set in motion changes I could never have predicted. My twins, Ethan and Mira, were preparing for their freshman year at MIT, packing up their childhood bedrooms amid excited discussions about quantum computing seminars and ethics in technology courses. After 16 years as just the three of us, our tight family unit was expanding cautiously include Alexander Harlow, billionaire tech CEO, father of my children, and the man who'd once taken our joint research and disappeared. I was adjusting to my own new reality, a consulting position at the Harlow Institute that allowed me to work primarily from home, 5% ownership in a company worth billions, and regular dinners with the man I'd once loved and then hated for longer than I'd known him. "Mom, do you think I should take Dad's offer to tour the quantum lab before orientation?" Ethan asked, leaning against my office doorway. The word Dad still sounded strange coming from him, a cautious experiment in redefined relationships. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing Harlow Technologies' financial disclosures as part of my due diligence as a significant shareholder. "That's up to you, honey. The Institute does amazing work, but I don't want you to feel pressured." Ethan shrugged, his lanky frame so like his father's it sometimes caught me off guard. "It might be interesting. Some of the quantum encryption work builds directly on the original algorithms you two developed. Just be your own person there," I advised. "Make sure people see you as Ethan Reynolds, not just Alexander Harlow's son." "Too late for that," Mira said, appearing beside her brother. "I've already had 3 people from the summer tech program connect with me on social media after they figured out who our father is." Her practical tone couldn't quite hide her discomfort with the attention. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. "Speaking of the devil," Mira murmured. "Be nice," I cautioned, heading to answer it. Alexander stood on our porch, casual in jeans and a simple button-down that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. 6 months of regular visits had made his presence less jarring, but I still felt that small hitch in my breathing whenever I saw him give a complicated response to the man who had been so many things to me. Research partner, first love, betrayer, co-parent, and now, what exactly? Right on time, I said, stepping aside to let him in. I brought dinner, he replied, holding up bags from an upscale Italian restaurant. And the scholarship information for the foundation's first cohort. The Twins Foundation for Underprivileged STEM Students had taken shape with remarkable speed, fueled by Alexander's resources and connections, Myra's strategic planning, and Ethan's genuine passion for creating opportunities like the ones that had helped me years ago. As we set up dinner in the kitchen, I observed the careful dance between Alexander and the twins. 6 months had softened the initial awkwardness, but there remained a watchful quality to their interactions, the twins still assessing whether their father's commitment would endure, Alexander still hyper-attentive to their responses, eager to make up for 16 years of absence. We heard back from Dr. Parker at Berkeley, Myra said as she arranged garlic bread in a basket. She's agreed to be on the selection committee for the foundation. That's excellent, Alexander replied, his pride evident. Her endorsement will add credibility to the scholarship program. We still need to finalize the selection criteria, Ethan added, his focus practical as always. The academic requirements versus financial need balance. I watched them discuss the foundation, this shared project that had given them common ground. It was Alexander who had suggested using part of the twins' trusts to establish it, encouraging them to find purpose for their sudden wealth beyond personal comfort. It was one of many small surprises that had challenged my long-held image of him as solely self-interested. Arya, Alexander's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Have you had a chance to review the board meeting agenda for next week? I nodded, though in truth I'd only skimmed it. The quarterly Harlow Technologies board meeting would be my first as a shareholder with voting rights, a position that still felt surreal. Not in detail yet. I've been focused on the foundation's legal structure. Take your time, he said easily. But I'd value your perspective on the new privacy initiative proposal. It aligns with some of your original concerns about data protection. If you've ever found yourself cautiously rebuilding trust with someone who once broke it, hit that like button right now. Comment trust twice if you understand the delicate balance between giving someone a second chance and protecting your heart from being hurt again. After dinner, the twins retreated to their rooms to continue packing, leaving Alexander and me alone at the kitchen table with coffee and the comfortable silence that had gradually developed between us. How are you really feeling about them leaving? He asked, studying my face with those dark eyes that still saw too much. Proud. Terrified. The usual parental paradox, I replied. They're more than ready for MIT, but this house is going to feel very empty. You've done an extraordinary job with them, Arya, he said, the simple praise carrying weight from the man who'd missed their entire childhood. The way Myra analyzes systems, the way Ethan approaches ethical questions alongside technical ones, that's all you. I didn't correct him, though we both knew the twins carried his intellectual gifts as much as any values I'd instilled. It was one of many complex truths of our situation. Alexander had abandoned us, yet his DNA, his brilliant mind, lived on in our children. Nature and nurture intertwined in ways impossible to separate. There's something I wanted to discuss with you, he said, his tone shifting to something more formal. The board position. I tensed slightly. Alexander had been suggesting I take a formal position on Harlow Technologies' board of directors for months, arguing that as a significant shareholder and co-creator of the company's foundational technology, I should have an official voice in its governance. I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of involvement, I hedged. You would be an asset, Arya. You see things differently than the rest of the board. Your perspective on the ethical applications of our technology is exactly what we need as we move into new markets. I need more time to understand the company before I could effectively serve on the board, I countered. I've only been consulting for the Institute for a few months, and that's just one division. Alexander leaned forward, earnestness in his expression. That's precisely why your perspective is valuable. You're not entrenched in corporate thinking. You question assumptions the rest of us take for granted. I'll consider it, I said, neither committing nor refusing. He nodded, accepting my ambivalence without pressing further. Another change from the Alexander I'd known at 23, who would have argued his point relentlessly until he won. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "The twins mentioned you've been reviewing the quarterly financial reports." "Just doing my due diligence as a shareholder," I replied lightly. "Of course." He hesitated, something flickering in his expression. "If you have any questions, come directly to me. Some of our government contracts and partnerships can be complex. Easy to misinterpret without context." I felt a chill at his words, though I couldn't have explained why. "Is there something specific I should know about?" No, he assured me quickly. "Just financial reports never tell the whole story of a company's operations. That's all." After Alexander left, I returned to my office and reopened my laptop, his warning, or was it a caution, echoing in my mind. I'd been methodically working through years of Harlow Technologies' financial disclosures, trying to understand the company that had grown from the encryption algorithm Alexander and I had developed as graduate students. Most of it was straightforward, if overwhelming in scale. Product development cycles, market expansion, acquisitions of smaller tech companies with complementary technologies. But there was a division labeled simply National Security Applications that appeared consistently in the reports with minimal detail and substantial revenue. I clicked through several more documents until a new email notification appeared in the corner of my screen. From Valencia Chen, Alexander's longtime colleague and the person who had helped arrange our fateful trip to Aspen 6 months ago. The message contained only a file attachment and 5 words: "You need to see this now." I opened the file to find what appeared to be internal documentation of government contracts between Harlow Technologies and various intelligence agencies, spanning more than a decade. Contracts for surveillance systems, data mining operations, and encryption backdoors, all built on variations of the algorithm Alexander and I had originally designed to protect privacy, not compromise it. The sick feeling in my stomach intensified as I scrolled through page after page of technical specifications. Our work, the mathematical breakthrough we'd made together, had been weaponized in exactly the way we had once vowed to prevent. A text message lit up my phone. Valencia asking if I'd received her email, suggesting we meet tomorrow away from the institute. I replied affirmatively, my mind racing with implications and questions. Had Alexander been lying all along about his regret, about wanting to reconnect with me and the twins? Was his insistence on bringing me into the company just a way to neutralize a potential threat? Had I been naive to believe he'd changed, that he valued the ethical considerations we'd once passionately debated? I closed my laptop and stared out the window at the summer night, the trust I'd cautiously rebuilt over 6 months suddenly on shaky ground. If you believe that actions speak louder than words when it comes to proving change, comment walk the talk below. Sometimes the true test of a person's character isn't what they say, but what they do when they think no one is watching. The following morning, I met Valencia at a small cafe 20 miles from the Harlow Institute, far enough from our usual haunts to avoid accidental encounters with colleagues. Valencia arrived precisely on time, elegant as always in a tailored pantsuit, her expression grave as she slid into the booth across from me. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly. "I've been debating whether to share this information with you for months." "Why now?" I asked. She stirred her coffee methodically. "Because you're about to join the board. Because the twins are starting at MIT, where they'll inevitably become more involved with Harlow Technologies. Because you deserve to know exactly what you're aligning yourself with." "Those contracts," I began, "are they legitimate?" "Yes." "Extensive?" "More than you can imagine." She leaned forward. "Alexander has built an empire on government partnerships that directly contradict the original vision you two had for your technology." I processed this confirmation of my fears, a cold weight settling in my chest. "Does he know you're showing me this?" Valencia shook her head. "Alex compartmentalizes. The board sees revenue streams but minimal operational details. Most employees work on commercial applications and have no idea about the government division. Only a handful of executives have the full picture. And you're one of them." I oversee the foundation and educational initiative specifically to maintain distance from those aspects of the company, she clarified. But I've been there long enough to know where the bodies are buried, so to speak. I studied her, this woman who had worked alongside Alexander for 12 years, who had facilitated our reunion. Why are you telling me this? Aren't you risking your position? Valencia met my gaze steadily. Because when you came to Aspen with those brilliant kids, I saw something change in Alex. For the first time in years, he seemed to remember who he used to be, what he once believed in. She paused. And because I think you might be the only person who could actually influence the company's direction now. I shook my head, overwhelmed. I own 5%, Valencia. That's hardly controlling interest. It's not about the percentage, she countered. It's about who you are to him. The co-creator of the original algorithm. The mother of his children. The woman he's never quite gotten over. She reached across the table to touch my hand. The contracts exist, Arya. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I had no answer. Not yet. When I returned home, the twins were in the backyard with Alexander, who had apparently stopped by unexpectedly with MIT sweatshirts and information about student housing. They looked up as I approached, three faces with the same questioning intelligence in their expressions. Everything okay, Mom? Mira asked, her perceptive gaze noting my tension immediately. Just a busy morning, I replied, forcing a smile. What's all this? Dad brought orientation schedules, Ethan explained. And floor plans of the dorms. Dad. The word still sounded foreign from my children's lips, directed at this man who had missed their first steps, first words, first everything. This man who, according to Valencia, had built an empire on principles contrary to everything we'd once believed in together. Alexander studied my face, concern evident in his expression. You seem upset, Arya. Is something wrong? Just processing a lot of changes, I said vaguely. The twins leaving, new responsibilities at the institute. He seemed to accept this explanation, though I caught Mira watching our interaction with the analytical gaze that missed nothing. My daughter, the strategic thinker, always connecting dots others missed. That evening after Alexander left, Mira appeared in my office doorway, her expression serious beyond her 17 years. What's going on between you and Dad? She asked directly. What do you mean? I hedged. She gave me the look that always made me feel transparent. You've been different since yesterday. Tense. Watching him like you're trying to solve a puzzle. I sighed, setting aside the pretense. I'm not sure yet. I'm still figuring it out. Is it about the company? She pressed. The government contracts. My head snapped up. How do you know about those? Mira shrugged, though I could see she was pleased to have confirmed her suspicion. I did some research after you mentioned reviewing the financial disclosures. There are patterns in the revenue streams that don't match standard commercial software licensing. And Dad is weirdly vague about certain divisions when I ask about potential internships. My brilliant, observant daughter. Of course she had noticed. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know yet, I admitted. I need more information before I make any decisions. Mira nodded, accepting this. Just, whatever happens with Dad and the company, don't let it affect the foundation, okay? The scholarship program is important. I reached for her hand, touched by her concern for the project that had become so meaningful to her and Ethan. The foundation is yours, no matter what. I promise. After she left, I returned to my laptop, diving deeper into the files Valencia had shared. The scope of Harlow Technologies' government partnerships was breathtaking, billions in contracts with intelligence agencies, defense departments, and law enforcement organizations worldwide. The technical specifications revealed modifications to our original algorithm that enabled massive data collection and analysis, digital surveillance tools, and encryption systems with deliberate backdoors to the exact vulnerabilities we had once vowed to eliminate from the digital world. One report detailed a facial recognition system deployed in 12 countries, built on our mathematical framework for pattern recognition but repurposed for mass surveillance. Another outlined how our secure communication protocol had been adapted to allow targeted interception of messages between persons of interest. Each document felt like a personal betrayal. The work Alexander and I had begun as idealistic graduate students, determined to protect digital privacy in an increasingly connected world, had been systematically twisted to serve the opposite purpose. The next morning, I drove to the Harlow Institute earlier than usual, my mind made up. I needed to confront Alexander directly, away from the twins, away from the board and other executives. I needed to look him in the eyes when he explained how our shared creation had been so fundamentally corrupted. His executive assistant seemed surprised by my unscheduled appearance but quickly ushered me into his office. Alexander looked up from his desk, genuine pleasure crossing his face before he registered my expression. "Arya, this is unexpected," I cut him off by placing my laptop on his desk, open to the files Valencia had shared. "Explain this to me, Alexander. Explain how our algorithm, the work we created to protect privacy, is now the foundation for global surveillance systems." His expression shifted from surprise to resignation. He closed his laptop and stood, moving to close his office door before returning to face me. "It's complicated, Arya," he began. "Then uncomplicated," I snapped. "Did you deliberately modify our work to enable government spying?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar from our past it momentarily threw me. "That's a vast oversimplification of a complex evolution. Stop evading and just tell me the truth. Was this your plan from the beginning? Is this why you took our research when you left?" "No," he said forcefully, his eyes meeting mine directly. "When I left, when I first commercialized the algorithm, it was exactly as we designed it, a privacy-protecting encryption system. The government applications came later, gradually." "How gradually?" I pressed. He sighed, leaning against his desk. "The first contract came 3 years after the company launched. The NSA approached us, concerned that our encryption was so effective it prevented legitimate security operations. They wanted a controlled backdoor for national security purposes. And you just gave it to them? After everything we discussed about the dangers of backdoors?" "I refused initially," he said, his gaze steady. "Then came the pressure. National security implications. Potential legislation that would cripple our commercial business. Competitors willing to provide what we wouldn't. So you caved." "I compromised," he corrected. "I created a version with limited, auditable access capabilities. Strictly controlled, requiring multiple authorizations and oversight." I shook my head in disgust. "And then what? Feature creep? More capabilities, less oversight, until suddenly you're providing full surveillance platforms to any government willing to pay." "It wasn't like that," he insisted. "Each step seemed reasonable at the time. Necessary trade-offs. Practical realities of operating in an increasingly complex security environment." I stared at him, trying to reconcile this corporate speak with the passionate, principled man I'd once known. The man who had vowed with me, late one night in our cramped apartment, that we would create technology that served people, not power structures. "What happened to you?" I asked quietly. "To us. To everything we believed in." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the polished CEO facade, revealing a glimpse of the person I'd once loved. "Reality happened, Arya," he said softly. The idealism of 2 brilliant but naive graduate students collided with the actual world, with its messy compromises and complex threat landscapes. He straightened, his voice strengthening. "Do you think I don't remember our conversations? Our principles? They've informed every difficult decision, every necessary compromise." "Necessary for whom? For what?" "Your profit margins." "For security," he countered. "For protection against genuine threats. The world isn't black and white, Arya. Sometimes protecting privacy means making calculated concessions to prevent worse alternatives. I felt a surge of anger at his rationalization. Don't you dare use safety as an excuse for surveillance. We specifically designed our algorithm to protect individuals without enabling mass data collection. And it still does, in its commercial applications, he argued. Millions of people use our encryption systems for exactly the purpose we intended. The government contracts are a separate division, built on the same foundation. Our work. I slammed my hand on his desk, frustration boiling over. You've taken what we created and perverted it, Alexander. And now you've drawn me back in, made me complicit. Is that why you wanted me on the board? To neutralize a potential critic? No. His denial was immediate, forceful. I wanted you involved because you bring the perspective we've lost, the ethical clarity, the commitment to first principles. I wanted you to help steer the company back toward its original mission. I laughed bitterly. By bringing me in after the damage is done. After you've locked in billions in government contracts. After our algorithm is embedded in surveillance systems worldwide. It's not too late to change direction, he insisted, stepping closer. With you on the board, with your voice in leadership discussions, we could begin transitioning away from the more problematic contracts, refocus on privacy-enhancing technologies. I studied his face, looking for deception, for the practiced charm he used in business settings. Instead, I saw something that looked remarkably like sincerity, and beneath it, a hint of the passionate idealist I'd once known. Before I could respond, the door opened behind us. The twins stood in the doorway, having apparently arrived for their scheduled tour of the quantum computing lab. Their expressions shifted from anticipation to concern as they registered the tension in the room. What's going on? Ethan asked, his gaze moving between us. Nothing that can't wait, Alexander said smoothly. We were just discussing some historical company decisions. About the surveillance contracts, I clarified, unwilling to let him minimize the conversation. About how our algorithm has been modified to enable government spying. The twins exchanged glances, that silent communication they'd perfected since childhood. Myra's eyes narrowed slightly, she'd already suspected. Ethan's widened with surprise and what looked like disappointment. Is that true? He asked his father directly. Alexander hesitated, clearly measuring his response. Yes, he finally admitted. Harlow Technologies has government contracts that include surveillance capabilities built on variations of our original encryption system. The one you and Mom created to protect privacy. Ethan pressed, his moral clarity cutting through corporate euphemisms. Yes. That's. Ethan seemed to search for words. That's the opposite of everything you two stood for. Of everything you've told us about your work together. The real world requires difficult choices, son, Alexander said, his tone gentle but firm. Security and privacy exist in tension. Sometimes protecting people means compromise. Or sometimes it means standing by your principles even when it's hard, I countered. Even when it costs you something. The twins watched this exchange with the careful attention of children who had grown up navigating complex adult dynamics. Mira, ever the strategist, broke the silence first. So what happens now? She asked pragmatically. I'm still figuring that out, I replied honestly. As am I, Alexander added, his gaze holding mine. But I hope we can work through this together, as a family. He turned to include the twins in his statement. All of us. Family doesn't mean ignoring wrong choices, Ethan said quietly. It means holding each other accountable. Alexander nodded, accepting the implicit criticism from his son with grace that surprised me. You're right, he acknowledged. And I welcome that accountability. From all of you. The moment hung between us, for people connected by blood and history and betrayal and tentative new bonds, trying to navigate a moral complexity none of us had anticipated 6 months ago when we'd begun this reconciliation. If you've ever had to choose between holding someone accountable and giving them room to grow, comment hard truth below. The most difficult conversations are often the most necessary ones. The week that followed was tense, filled with difficult conversations and soul-searching. The twins, now fully aware of the ethical dilemma at the heart of Harlow Technologies, peppered both Alexander and me with questions about the surveillance contracts, the technical specifications, and the decision-making that had led to them. To Alexander's credit, he answered their questions directly, without corporate evasions or attempts to minimize his responsibility. He explained the gradual evolution of the government partnerships, the external pressures and internal justifications, the complex calculus of security versus privacy that had guided his decisions. "I want you both to understand the full context," he told them during a dinner at his Aspen home, where we'd gathered to continue our difficult conversation. "Not to excuse my choices, but to see the complexity of the situations that led to them." "Complexity doesn't justify betraying your core principles," Ethan argued, his expression serious. "No, it doesn't," Alexander agreed, surprising me again with his willingness to accept criticism. "But it does explain how someone can make a series of decisions, each seemingly reasonable in isolation, that collectively lead them far from where they intended to be." Mira, who had been quietly analytical throughout our discussions, finally spoke up. "What percentage of Harlow Technologies' revenue comes from these government contracts?" Alexander hesitated, then answered honestly. "Currently, about 32%. Mira nodded, processing this. "So dismantling that division would significantly impact the company's value. The stock price would drop, affecting thousands of employees and shareholders." "Yes," Alexander confirmed. "It would be a major restructuring with substantial financial implications." "But not impossible," Mira pressed. "No, not impossible," he acknowledged. "Difficult, complex, requiring careful planning and execution over time, but not impossible." I watched this exchange with a mixture of pride and wonder. My daughter, not yet 18, was analyzing the situation with the strategic clarity of a seasoned executive, pushing past emotional reactions to understand the practical realities. The twins left us shortly after dinner, heading back to the resort where we were staying. Alexander and I remained on his terrace, the mountain air crisp around us, the weight of our unresolved conflict hanging between us. "They're extraordinary," he said after a long silence. "The way they're processing this, asking the right questions, considering multiple perspectives. They've had to navigate complex situations their whole lives," I replied. "Being the children of a single mother with limited resources teaches resilience and critical thinking." He nodded, accepting the implied criticism without defense. "I've been thinking about something Ethan said earlier, about betraying core principles. And he's right," Alexander said simply. "Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what we originally intended to create. Each decision seemed justified at the time, each compromise necessary, but the cumulative effect." He gestured vaguely. "I built something very different from what we dreamed of." I studied him in the fading light, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Do you regret it? The surveillance contracts, the government partnerships?" "Parts of them, yes," he admitted. "Others." He sighed. "The reality is, Arya, some of those systems have prevented genuine threats. Stopped actual attacks. Saved lives. At what cost?" I challenged. "Mass surveillance changes how people behave, how they think. It chills speech, inhibits association, undermines the very democracy it claims to protect." "I know the arguments," he said with a faint smile. "I remember making them with you, late at night in our apartment. I haven't forgotten, Arya. I've just seen more of the world's complexity since then." We sat in silence for a moment, the philosophical divide between us as vast as it had been 16 years ago, yet somehow different now. More nuanced, less absolute on both sides. "So what do we do?" I asked finally. "Where do we go from here?" "That depends," he replied carefully. "On what you want. On what you're willing to accept. And if I can't accept the company as it is now?" He met my gaze directly. "Then help me change it. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. As a significant shareholder, I had the right to attend regardless of whether I accepted the board position Alexander had been offering. After days of consideration, of reviewing documents and discussing implications with the twins, I had decided to attend not as a silent observer, but as an active participant with pointed questions about the company's direction. The night before the meeting, I sat in my hotel room reviewing my notes when a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Mira standing in the hallway, her expression determined. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble, striding into the room. "About Dad's company. About the foundation. About all of it." "And?" I prompted, recognizing my daughter's process, thinking deeply before presenting a fully formed analysis. She paced the room, organizing her thoughts. Dad made a series of compromises that led the company away from its original mission. That's clear. But dismantling the government contracts overnight would be economically disastrous and potentially create security vulnerabilities. That's the argument he's making, yes, I acknowledge. It's valid, even if we don't like it, she insisted. But there's a third path. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Which is? Transition, she said simply. A planned, strategic shift away from surveillance-focused applications toward privacy-enhancing technologies. Gradually unwinding the problematic contracts while developing new products that align with the original vision. That would take years, I pointed out. Yes, Mira agreed. But it would be genuine change, not just cosmetic. And it would require something significant from both of you. What's that? From Dad, a public commitment to this new direction, with concrete metrics and timelines. From you, she fixed me with her perceptive gaze, a willingness to be part of the transformation rather than just criticizing from the outside. Her insight startled me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. My daughter had always possessed an uncanny ability to see to the heart of complex situations, to find the balanced center in polarized debates. You're suggesting I take the board position, I realized. She nodded. Not to endorse what the company has become, but to help shape what it could be. After she left, I sat with her suggestion, turning it over in my mind. There was wisdom in her approach, practical, strategic, focused on tangible outcomes rather than moral absolutism. It acknowledged both the reality of what Harlow Technologies had become and the possibility of what it might yet be. The following morning, I dressed carefully in a tailored suit that Valencia had helped me select months ago when I first agreed to the consulting position. Professional, confident, with none of the uncertainty I felt as I prepared to enter the boardroom of a multi-billion-dollar company and challenge its fundamental direction. Alexander met me in the lobby, his expression carefully neutral. "Have you made a decision?" he asked quietly. "About the board position?" "Not yet," I replied. "But I have several questions for today's meeting." He nodded, accepting this. "The surveillance contracts will come up in the quarterly review. If you have concerns, that would be the appropriate time to raise them." "I plan to," I confirmed. The boardroom was imposing, all glass and steel and mountain views, designed to impress and intimidate. The board members, mostly men in expensive suits with the confident demeanor of those accustomed to power, watched with barely concealed curiosity as Alexander introduced me. "As most of you know, this is Aria Reynolds," he said formally. "Co-creator of our core encryption algorithm and a significant shareholder following our recent equity adjustment. She's considering joining the board and is attending today as an observer." The meeting proceeded with the standard corporate choreography: approval of minutes, financial reports, market updates. I listened carefully, noting how certain divisions were discussed in vague terms while others received detailed analysis. The government contracts were mentioned only as aggregate revenue figures, with minimal specifics about their nature or ethical implications. Finally, during the discussion of upcoming contracts and strategic partnerships, I raised my hand. Alexander, with a barely perceptible nod, acknowledged me. "I have a question about the National Security Applications Division," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Specifically, about how its current activities align with the company's original mission of enhancing digital privacy and security. A ripple of tension moved through the room. Several board members exchanged glances. Alexander remained impassive, though I caught a flicker of something approval. Concern in his eyes. An older man at the far end of the table leaned forward. Thomas Bradford, I presumed from Valencia's descriptions, the longtime legal counsel who had been with the company since its earliest days. The one who had sent me that cease and desist letter 16 years ago when I tried to contact Alexander about my pregnancy. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, his tone carefully modulated, the National Security Applications Division operates under specific confidentiality protocols. Many aspects of its operations aren't appropriate for open discussion, even in board meetings. I'm not asking for classified details, I clarified. I'm asking about alignment with stated corporate values and long-term strategic direction. As the co-creator of the technology underlying these applications, I have concerns about how it's being deployed. Bradford's expression hardened slightly. With all due respect, your involvement with the original algorithm ended 16 years ago. The company has evolved significantly since then. Which is precisely my point, I countered. Has that evolution been consistent with the technology's intended purpose? With the privacy protections it was designed to provide? Alexander intervened before Bradford could respond. Arya raises a valid question, he said, his tone measured. One that I've been considering myself in recent strategic planning. He turned to address the full board. The truth is, our government partnerships have drifted increasingly toward surveillance applications that may not align with our core values of enhancing privacy and user control. A murmur of surprise ran through the room. This was clearly not what they had expected from their CEO. Are you suggesting we reconsider these partnerships? Asked a woman I recognized as the chief financial officer. They represent nearly a third of our annual revenue. Not immediately, no, Alexander replied. But I am proposing a strategic transition, a planned shift away from surveillance-focused applications toward privacy-enhancing technologies that better reflect our founding principles. I felt a jolt of surprise. This was essentially what Mira had proposed the night before, a measured transition rather than an abrupt reversal. Had Alexander independently reached the same conclusion? Or had my daughter shared her thoughts with her father? Bradford leaned forward again, his expression skeptical. Alexander, we've built substantial business around these partnerships. The governmental relationships have taken years to develop. Unwinding them would have significant financial implications. I'm aware of that, Thomas, Alexander replied calmly. Which is why I'm proposing a transition, not an immediate termination. A carefully planned evolution of our product offerings and client relationships over the next 3 to 5 years. The discussion that followed was intense, with board members raising concerns about financial impacts, competitive positioning, and shareholder value. Alexander addressed each point methodically, laying out a vision for Harlow Technologies that gradually returned to its roots while maintaining its market position through new, privacy-centered innovations. Throughout the debate, I observed him with growing amazement. The Alexander Harlow speaking, now articulate, strategic, yet firmly principled, seemed like a synthesis of the idealistic young man I'd once loved and the pragmatic business leader he'd become. He was proposing not a rejection of reality's complexities, but a recommitment to core values within those complexities. When the initial discussion wound down, Alexander turned to me directly. Arya, as the co-creator of our foundational technology, your voice would be invaluable in guiding this transition. Would you reconsider joining the board in an official capacity? All eyes turned to me, awaiting my response. The moment felt weighted with significance, not just for Harlow Technologies, but for the twins, for Alexander and me, for the complex family we were cautiously building. I would consider it, I said carefully, under certain conditions. Which are? Alexander prompted. Complete transparency about all current government contracts. A concrete timeline and measurable benchmarks for the transition. And formal recognition, company-wide, of the ethical principles that guided the original algorithm's development. Alexander nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. All reasonable requests. Are there others? Yes, I replied, meeting his gaze directly. A formal ethics committee with actual authority to review and potentially veto new applications of our technology. And I want to chair it. Bradford made a small sound of protest, but Alexander silenced him with a glance. Agreed, he said simply. To all conditions. The meeting continued for another hour, with technical discussions of implementation strategies and market messaging for the proposed transition. Throughout it all, I felt a growing sense that something significant had shifted not just in Harlow Technologies' direction, but in my relationship with Alexander and with the past we shared. As the board members filed out after the meeting's conclusion, Alexander remained behind, waiting until we were alone before speaking. Thank you, he said simply. For what? Challenging the company's direction? Demanding changes to contracts worth billions? For pushing me to be better than I've been, he replied. For reminding me of who we once were together. He paused, his expression more vulnerable than I'd seen it in our adult interactions. I meant what I said, Arya. About wanting to return to our original vision. About needing your voice to help guide that process. I studied him, trying to reconcile the man before me with both the passionate graduate student I'd loved and the ruthless businessman who'd taken our work and disappeared. Perhaps they had always been the same person, brilliant, complex, capable of both principled idealism and pragmatic compromise. Perhaps I had been naive to see only one aspect before. I believe you want to change the company's direction, I said finally. But intentions aren't enough, Alexander. The surveillance systems exist. They're being used right now, all over the world. I know, he acknowledged. And I can't undo that reality overnight. But I can begin steering us in a different direction. With your help, if you're willing to give it. If you've ever found yourself standing at a crossroads torn between walking away from a complicated situation or staying to help create the change you want to see, type turning point in the comments. Sometimes the hardest choice is whether to leave or to stay and fight for transformation. The decision to join Harlow Technologies board felt like stepping into quicksand, uncertain, potentially dangerous, yet somehow necessary. After the meeting, I returned to my hotel to find the twins waiting, eager to hear what had happened. How did it go? Mira asked immediately, looking up from her laptop where she'd been finalizing scholarship criteria for their foundation. Your father proposed exactly what you suggested, I said, studying her face for a reaction. A planned transition away from surveillance technologies over 3 to 5 years. She maintained a carefully neutral expression. Great minds think alike, I guess. Did you talk to him? I pressed. A brief consultation, she admitted with a slight smile. We may have compared notes on strategic approaches that I shook my head, amused despite myself. My 17-year-old daughter, already negotiating corporate transitions with billionaire CEOs. And you? Ethan asked, his moral concern still evident in his tone. Are you going to join the board? I'm considering it, I replied honestly. Alexander agreed to all my conditions, including an ethics committee with actual authority to review applications of the technology. Ethan's eyebrows rose. And you would chair it? I nodded. That's significant, he acknowledged. If it has real power and isn't just for show. I'd make sure of that, I assured him. As the twins discussed the implications, I stepped onto the balcony, needing a moment alone with my thoughts. The mountain air was crisp, the view spectacular, a physical reminder of how far I'd come from our cramped graduate student apartment where Alexander and I had first developed our algorithm. 6 months ago, I'd arrived in Aspen intent on confronting Alexander about the past, about his abandonment of me and his children. Now I was contemplating joining his company, helping reshape the very technology that had built his fortune while I struggled as a single mother. Life's strange symmetry wasn't lost on me. The work that had initially brought us together, then torn us apart, might now reunite us in an entirely new configuration. My phone buzzed with a text from Alexander, dinner tonight? To discuss next steps. Just us. I hesitated before replying, 8 p.m. Hotel restaurant. His response came immediately, see you then. If you've ever had to work alongside someone who once broke your trust, hit that like button right now. Sometimes the hardest relationships to navigate are the ones with complicated history. Alexander arrived precisely at 8, dressed more casually than he had been at the board meeting but still exuding the quiet confidence that 16 years of success had cultivated. I'd chosen a corner table, private enough for honest conversation but public enough to maintain professional boundaries. Thank you for agreeing to dinner, he said as he sat across from me. This is a business discussion, I clarified, though we both knew the line between personal and professional had always been blurry for us. Of course, he acknowledged with a slight smile. About your role on the board and the ethics committee. After ordering, we dove into the practical details, meeting schedules, reporting structures, and the scope of the ethics committee's authority. Alexander had clearly been thinking about this, presenting a framework that gave the committee genuine oversight without creating paralyzing bureaucracy. You've put a lot of thought into this, I observed. I've been considering a course correction for longer than you might think, he admitted. Your arrival with the twins accelerated something that was already in motion. This surprised me. You were already planning to transition away from surveillance technologies? Not specifically, no, he replied carefully. But I've been increasingly uncomfortable with certain applications. With the distance between what we originally intended and what the technology has become. Yet you continued signing the contracts, I pointed out. Yes, he acknowledged without defensiveness. Because running a company this size involves thousands of people's livelihoods. Shareholders' investments. Market expectations. Moving too quickly or impulsively could cause more harm than good. I studied him across the table, this man I was still learning to understand in his adult incarnation. There was a weight to him now that the young Alexander hadn't carried, the burden of responsibility, of consequences, of compromises made and principles bent. Why did you really bring me in, Alexander? I asked suddenly. The truth this time. He met my gaze directly, something shifting in his expression. Because you're the only person who knew me before all this. Before the billions, before the government partnerships, before I became someone who could rationalize surveillance systems as necessary compromises. He paused, his voice softening. You knew me when our principles were clear, when our purpose was undiluted by pragmatism. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't corporate speak or strategic positioning. This felt like the truth, perhaps the most honest thing he'd said to me since we'd reconnected. So I'm what, your moral compass? I asked, not entirely comfortable with the role. More like a reminder, he clarified. Of who I wanted to be. Of what we wanted to create together. Our food arrived, giving me a moment to process his words. When the server left, I changed the subject slightly. The twins told me you've offered them summer internships at the institute after their first year at MIT. If they're interested, yes, he confirmed. No pressure, completely their choice. I'd never used their professional opportunities as leverage in our personal relationship. I nodded, appreciating his understanding of my concern. Myra's considering it. Ethan's more hesitant, that am understandable, given his stronger ethical objections to the government contracts, Alexander observed. He's always been that way, I said with a small smile. Even as a child, he had this innate sense of fairness. Once he refused to play a board game because he thought the rules gave certain players an unfair advantage. Alexander laughed softly. That sounds familiar. My mother used to say I had an overdeveloped sense of justice as a kid. The mention of his mother, a woman who had died before I met him, whose absence had shaped him profoundly, created an unexpected moment of connection between us. A reminder of the personal history we'd once shared beyond our work. As dinner continued, our conversation gradually shifted from business to more personal territory, the twins' preparations for MIT, my art commissions, his recent efforts to simplify his life despite his wealth. It felt almost normal, this catching up between two people with shared history, if you ignored the 16-year gap and the billions of dollars between us. When dessert arrived, Alexander hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else I've been meaning to discuss with you. Something personal." I tensed slightly, wary of where this might be heading. "Yes. I'd like to establish a separate trust," he said carefully. "For you, independent of your company's shares or the twins' educational funds. To compensate for the years you raised them alone, without my support." I set down my fork, uncomfortable with the suggestion. "I don't want your money, Alexander." "It's not about what you want," he countered gently. "It's about what's right. You worked multiple jobs while raising two exceptional children. You postponed your own career ambitions, lived frugally, made countless sacrifices. While He gestured vaguely, encompassing his wealth, his privilege. Built a billion-dollar company, I finished for him. Using technology we created together, he emphasized. Technology that should have supported all three of you from the beginning. I understand the impulse, I said carefully. But that kind of financial arrangement feels complicated. Especially as we're establishing a professional relationship. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. I respect that. But the offer stands, whenever or if ever you change your mind. As we finished dinner, Alexander paid the bill despite my protest. Some habits of wealth were clearly ingrained and we walked together toward the hotel lobby. When will you decide about the board position? He asked as we reached the elevator. I've already decided, I replied. I'll join, but with full voting rights on my shares and complete independence to build the ethics committee as I see fit. Relief washed across his features. Thank you, Arya. You won't regret it. I'm not doing it for you, I clarified. I'm doing it because it's the right thing for the technology we created. For what it should have been all along. He nodded, accepting this boundary. Of course. As the elevator arrived, I stepped in, then turned to face him. Good night, Alexander. Good night, Arya, he replied, making no move to join me, respecting the subtle distance I'd established. I'll see you tomorrow at the foundation meeting with the twins. As the doors closed between us, I leaned against the elevator wall, exhaling slowly. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined having dinner with Alexander Harlow, let alone joining his company's board of directors. Life had a way of creating paths you never anticipated, connections you never planned for. If you believe that doing what's right sometimes means engaging with difficult situations rather than walking away from them, comment, stay and change below. The hardest work often happens in the places we'd rather avoid. The foundation meeting the following morning brought together the twins, Alexander, and several education experts to finalize the scholarship program structure before the twins left for MIT. Watching Ethan and Mira present their vision articulate, passionate, thoroughly researched filled me with pride that momentarily overshadowed my complicated feelings about Alexander and Harlow Technologies. We've structured the selection criteria to balance academic achievement with demonstrated financial need, Mira explained, displaying a slide with carefully calibrated metrics. But we've also built in flexibility for exceptional cases that might not fit the standard parameters. And we've incorporated mentorship requirements, Ethan added. Each scholarship recipient will be paired with both an academic advisor and an industry professional relevant to their field of interest. The education experts around the table nodded approvingly, offering minor suggestions but clearly impressed by the program's thoughtful design. Alexander, I noticed, remained mostly silent, allowing the twins to lead the discussion without parental intervention. When the meeting concluded, he approached them with evident pride. This is extraordinary work, he said simply. You've created something meaningful that will change lives for years to come. Mira accepted the praise with her usual poise, but I caught the flicker of pleasure in her eyes at her father's approval. Ethan, still more reserved in his interactions with Alexander, nevertheless nodded in acknowledgement. We should be able to announce the first cohort of scholars before we leave for MIT, he said. Assuming the legal structure is finalized. Alexander nodded. The foundation's paperwork will be completed next week. Everything will be ready for your announcement. As the experts filed out, the four of us remained in the conference room, our unconventional family unit, still finding its equilibrium after the revelations about Harlow Technologies' government contracts. Mom's joining the board, Mira said suddenly, her gaze fixed on her father. And chairing a new ethics committee. I know, Alexander replied. We discussed it last night. Will it have real authority? Ethan asked directly, his expression serious. Or is it just for appearances? Alexander met his son's skeptical gaze without flinching. The committee will have veto power over new applications of our core technologies, he confirmed. And oversight of the transition plan away from surveillance-focused contracts. Ethan considered this, his expression thoughtful. That's significant. If it's implemented as described. It will be, I assured him. I wouldn't have agreed otherwise. A moment of understanding passed between us, mother and son, united in our ethical concerns yet approaching them from different angles. Ethan with the moral clarity of youth, me with the pragmatic recognition that change often required engagement rather than rejection. We leave for MIT in 3 weeks, Mira reminded us, changing the subject slightly. We should discuss logistics for parents' weekend and holiday breaks. The conversation shifted to practical matters, dorm supplies, travel arrangements, academic schedules. The mundane details of family life, remarkable only in their normalcy given our extraordinary circumstances. For a moment, we might have been any family preparing to send twins to college, negotiating the transition with care and attention. As we left the conference room, Alexander touched my arm lightly, indicating he wanted a private word. The twins continued ahead, deep in discussion about course selection strategy. Thank you, he said quietly when they were out of earshot. For agreeing to join the board. For giving the company a chance to evolve rather than just condemning what it's become. Don't mistake my engagement for approval, Alexander, I cautioned. I'm joining to help change what needs changing, not to endorse the status quo. That I understand that, he replied. And I respect it. He hesitated before continuing. I meant what I said about wanting to return to our original vision, Arya. It may take time, it may be complicated, but the intention is genuine. I studied his face, looking for signs of the calculated charm he used in business settings. Instead, I found something that looked remarkably like sincerity, and beneath it, a hint of the passionate idealist I'd once known. I'd like to believe that, I said finally. Show me with actions, not words. I plan to, he promised. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation as the twins finalized their MIT arrangements and I prepared for my new role at Harlow Technologies. Alexander kept a respectful distance, providing resources and support without imposing his presence, seeming to understand that these last weeks before the twins left were precious to me. The night before their departure, I found myself in Ethan's room, helping him sort through the last of his packing. Unlike Mira, whose suitcases had been organized for days, Ethan tended to leave things until the final moment. Do you think I'm making a mistake? I asked suddenly, folding a sweatshirt and placing it in his suitcase. Joining the board, trying to change things from within. He looked up, surprised by the question. Since when do you ask for my approval, Mom? Since you became old enough to see situations more clearly than I sometimes can, I admitted. Especially ethical dilemmas. He considered this, his expression thoughtful. I think. He paused, organizing his thoughts. I think institutions only change when people who care about doing the right thing engage with them, not when they walk away. The maturity of his perspective struck me. At 17, Ethan sometimes displayed wisdom beyond his years, particularly in matters of principle. Dad did something wrong with the technology you created together, he continued. But walking away won't undo that. Being there, having a voice in its future direction that might. When did you get so wise? I asked, only half joking. He smiled slightly. Probably around the same time you taught me that the hardest right choices are usually the ones that require staying and doing the work, not leaving when things get complicated. His words echoed my own teachings back to me, lessons I'd tried to instill through example during their childhood, through the difficult choices and persistent effort that had defined our life together. That night, after the twins had gone to bed, I sat in my studio surrounded by partially packed art supplies. I would be relocating closer to Harlow Technology's main campus in the coming months and considered the path ahead. Joining the board, chairing the ethics committee, helping steer a multi-billion-dollar company away from problematic government partnerships while protecting its commercial viability. It was a daunting task, made more complex by my personal history with Alexander and my ongoing concern about his true intentions. Could I trust that he genuinely wanted to return to our original vision? Or was I being naive again, setting myself up for another betrayal? My phone buzzed with a text message from Alexander, "Everything set for tomorrow's drive to MIT?" "All packed," I replied. "Valencia sent a car to transport their things." "Thank you for arranging that." "Of course," he responded. Then, after a brief pause, "How tomorrow is your time with them? But I'd like to see them off, if that's all right." I appreciated that he asked rather than assumed. "Yes, that's fine. We're leaving at 8. "I'll meet you there," he confirmed. Another pause, then, "How are you feeling about all this? Them leaving, the board position, everything changing at once?" The personal nature of the question caught me off guard. Like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, I wrote back honestly. "Terrified and exhilarated all at once." "I understand that feeling," he replied. "When I left our apartment 16 years ago, I stepped into that first meeting with investors without you. It felt exactly like that." The reference to our shared past, to the moment he'd made the choice that had altered both our lives so dramatically, created an unexpected intimacy in our exchange. For a brief moment, the years and betrayals between us seemed to compress. "The difference is," I wrote after consideration, "I'm not leaving anyone behind this time." His response came quickly, "No, you're not. And neither am I, not anymore." I set down my phone, unsure how to continue that particular conversation, the boundaries between personal and professional, past and present, too blurred for comfort. The following morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect New England fall day for new beginnings. The twins moved with the synchronized efficiency they developed since childhood, loading the last of their belongings into the waiting car, double-checking documents and devices, preparing to step into their independent lives. Alexander arrived as promised, parking his understated luxury sedan behind our more modest vehicle. He approached with a gift bag in each hand, his expression a mixture of pride and hesitation. "Just a few things that might be useful," he explained, handing them to the twins. "Nothing extravagant." Mira opened hers first, pulling out a state-of-the-art tablet with specialized stylus. "For your strategic planning and visualization work," Alexander explained. "It has some custom applications I thought might complement your approach." Ethan's bag contained a similarly high-end device, but oriented toward computational modeling. And a handwritten letter, which he tucked away without reading, though I caught the flicker of emotion in his eyes at the gesture. "Thank you," he said simply. "You're welcome," Alexander replied, equally straightforward. "Use it, don't use it entirely your choice." The four of us stood awkwardly in the driveway, this newly formed family unit about to separate again. The twins would be at MIT, Alexander at Harlow Technology's main campus, me initially still at home but soon relocating for my new role. "Well," I said finally, "we should probably get going. Traffic will be heavy near Boston." "Of course," Alexander agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I've taken the liberty of arranging a family dinner next month during Parents' Weekend. At Catalyst, that restaurant near campus you both mentioned liking during the tour. Again, entirely optional. Just an open invitation." I bit back my instinctive irritation at his unilateral planning. The gesture was thoughtful, if presumptuous. And the twins seemed pleased by the suggestion. We'll be there, Mira confirmed, speaking for all of us with her usual decisiveness. The goodbye was brief, restrained Alexander clearly conscious of not overstepping, the twins still navigating their evolving relationship with their father. He hugged them each once, told them he was proud of them, and stepped back to let me have my own farewell. My goodbye was messier, less contained 16 years of single parenthood culminating in this moment of releasing them into the world. I hugged them too tightly, reminded them of things they already knew, fought back tears that they pretended not to notice. We're going to be fine, Mom, Ethan assured me, his voice gentle. It's just MIT, not Mars, Mira added practically, though I caught the slight tremor in her voice. We'll call you tonight when we're settled. As they drove away, Alexander and I stood side by side in my driveway, watching the car until it disappeared around the corner. Parents united in this moment of transition, despite the complicated history between us. They'll be exceptional, he said quietly. They already are. Yes, I agreed. Then, because it felt important to acknowledge, they got that from both of us. He turned to me, surprise and gratitude flickering across his features. Thank you for saying that. For allowing me to be part of this day. They're your children too, Alexander, I said simply. Whatever happened between us, that's always been true. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 16 years of separate lives, of choices made and paths not taken, hanging between us. I should go, he said finally. Let you process this transition in peace. But I'll see you Monday at the first ethics committee meeting. I nodded. Monday, 9 a.m. I'll be there. As he walked to his car, I called after him impulsively. Alexander? He turned, eyebrows raised in question. Why did you really send that invitation 6 months ago? After all these years of silence? He considered the question carefully before answering. Because I finally had enough success to feel secure, enough perspective to recognize what I'd lost, and enough courage to face the consequences of my choices. He paused. And because not knowing you, not knowing them, it had become a void I couldn't fill with any amount of professional achievement or financial success. The honesty in his answer disarmed me. This was not the calculated response of a businessman or the smooth charm of a practiced negotiator. This was Alexander Harlow, the man beneath the billions, acknowledging a fundamental human need for connection that transcended balance sheets and board meetings. Thank you for your honesty, I said simply. He nodded once, then continued to his car. I watched him drive away, this man who had once been everything to me, who had become a stranger, and who now existed in some undefined space between colleague and co-parent, between past and potential future. If some relationships in your life defy simple categorization, too complex for easy labels, too important to abandon, too fraught to fully embrace, comment complicated love below. Sometimes the most meaningful connections are the ones that challenge our capacity for forgiveness, understanding, and growth. My first official day at Harlow Technologies began with a tour of the main campus, a sprawling complex of modern buildings nestled against a wooded landscape, designed to blend cutting-edge technology with environmental consciousness. Valencia guided me through security protocols, introduced me to key personnel, and finally led me to my new office, a corner space with sweeping views and an adjoining conference room for ethics committee meetings. We've selected potential committee members based on your requirements, she explained, handing me a tablet with detailed profiles. A mix of technical experts, ethicists, human rights specialists, and legal scholars with security clearance to review all applications of our technology. I scrolled through the impressive list, noting the diversity of perspectives represented. This is excellent, Valencia. Thank you. She hesitated, then spoke more quietly. There's something else you should know, Arya. Something not widely known within the company. I looked up, immediately alert. Yes. Alexander has been working on something called Protocol Zero for the past 3 years, she said. A comprehensive restructuring of our core encryption system that would essentially make the surveillance backdoors impossible to maintain. I stared at her, processing this revelation. Are you saying he's been planning to undermine the government contracts all along? Not exactly, she clarified. He's been developing a technical foundation for a potential future transition. The implementation timeline has always been unclear, dependent on contractual obligations and market conditions. But the technology exists. The capability to return to our original vision of privacy protection. She nodded. In prototype form, yes. He's kept it compartmentalized, outside normal development channels. Very few people know about it. This information shifted my understanding of Alexander's recent proposals. His suggested transition away from surveillance technologies wasn't just a response to my arrival and criticism, it had been in development for years, awaiting the right moment for implementation. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Valencia met my gaze directly. Because you need to know that his commitment to change isn't just words, Arya. It predates your return to his life. The board meeting where he proposed the transition. That wasn't spontaneous. He's been laying groundwork for years, waiting for the right alignment of technical capability, market conditions, and board composition. She left me with that revelation, closing the door softly behind her. I sat at my new desk, trying to reconcile this information with my understanding of Alexander Harlow, the brilliant, flawed, complicated man who had shaped so much of my life, directly and indirectly. Had I misjudged him? Not about the original betrayal taking our research, disappearing, filing patents without me, but about his evolution since then. About his capacity for recognizing his mistakes and working, however gradually, to correct them. Later that morning, the ethics committee convened for its inaugural meeting. I'd selected 5 members from Valencia's list, balancing technical expertise with ethical perspective, and Alexander had approved them without question or modification. As we introduced ourselves and outlined the committee's purpose, I studied the individuals I'd be working with: Dr. Elaine Washington, a respected AI ethicist from Stanford; James Chen, former privacy counsel for a major tech company; Sofia Rodriguez, human rights attorney specializing in digital surveillance issues; Marcus Johnson, cybersecurity expert with government clearance; and Ravi Patel, technical director from Harlow's encryption division. Our mandate is clear, I explained once introductions were complete. To evaluate all applications of Harlow Technologies' core encryption system against ethical standards of privacy protection, informed consent, and human rights. We have authority to review existing implementations and veto power over new deployments. That's significant authority, Dr. Washington observed. Unprecedented in my experience with tech companies. It is, I agreed. And it comes directly from the CEO and board, with full enforcement mechanisms built into the corporate governance structure. We spent the next 2 hours establishing our review methodology, prioritizing current applications for evaluation, and scheduling future meetings. The team was engaged, thoughtful, raising important questions and suggesting useful frameworks. As the meeting concluded, I felt a cautious sense of optimism. This wasn't just corporate window dressing or ethical theater. This was a genuine mechanism for change, with real authority and capable members committed to meaningful oversight. Alexander was waiting outside the conference room when we finished, maintaining a respectful distance as the committee members departed. When we were alone, he approached cautiously. "How did it go?" he asked. "Well," I replied. "They're a strong team. Independent thinkers with relevant expertise." "Good," he nodded. "That's what we need." Then, after a brief hesitation, "Valencia told me she informed you about Protocol 0. "Yes," I confirmed. "Were you planning to mention it yourself?" "Eventually," he admitted. "Once I was certain of its viability. It's still experimental, not ready for full implementation. But it exists," I pressed. "The technical foundation for returning to our original vision." He met my gaze directly. "Yes. I've been working on it since I realized how far we drifted from what we originally intended to create. 3 years ago, according to Valencia." He nodded. After a particularly troubling government request that pushed ethical boundaries even further than previous contracts. I realized then that we needed an exit strategy not just contractually, but technically. A way to evolve the technology itself beyond the possibility of misuse. I studied him, this man who continually defied my attempts to categorize him simply as villain or hero in the story of our intertwined lives. Even while signing surveillance contracts worth billions, he had been secretly developing technology to eventually render them obsolete. Why not tell me about this immediately? When I first confronted you about the contracts. He considered the question thoughtfully. Because I didn't want it to seem like an excuse, he said finally. Like I was trying to buy forgiveness with promises of future redemption. The contracts exist. The surveillance systems are deployed. Those are facts I needed to own without qualification. His answer surprised me with its self-awareness, its willingness to accept responsibility without deflection. I'd like to see the technical specifications, I said. To understand how Protocol 0 works. Of course, he agreed immediately. I'll arrange a secure briefing whenever you're ready. As he turned to leave, I asked the question that had been forming since Valencia's revelation. Why develop Protocol 0 in secret? Why not announce it publicly, begin the transition years ago? He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar from our past it momentarily disoriented me. The government contracts have complex termination clauses, he explained. National security implications, potential liability issues. Moving too openly too soon could have triggered legal challenges that might have derailed the entire project. So you played the long game, I observed. Building the technical foundation quietly while maintaining the relationships. He nodded. Not ideal, not perfect, but the most viable path I could see from where we were to where we needed to be. As he spoke, I recognized the strategic thinking that had always characterized his approach to complex problems, seeing multiple moves ahead, planning for contingencies, finding the path of least resistance toward a distant goal. It was the same brilliance that had made him my intellectual equal in our research days, that had built a technology empire after he left. I'm not asking you to approve of how I've handled this, Arya, he said quietly. Just to understand that I've been trying, however imperfectly, to find my way back to the principles we once shared. The sincerity in his voice touched something I'd thought long buried. A willingness to see beyond black and white judgments, to recognize the complex humanity in choices I might not have made myself. I understand trying to do the right thing within difficult constraints, I said finally. I raised 2 children alone while working multiple jobs and finishing my degree. I know about impossible choices and imperfect solutions. He nodded, accepting the implicit connection between our different struggles. Thank you, he said simply. For your willingness to see complexity rather than just failure. As he left my office, I turned to the window, looking out at the campus that represented both our shared past and this unexpected new chapter. The path forward remained uncertain, filled with professional challenges and personal complications, but for the first time since discovering the surveillance contracts, I felt something like hope for the future of our technology. If you believe that real redemption isn't about perfect solutions but about persistent effort in the right direction, type step by step in the comments. Sometimes the journey back to our best selves is longer and more complicated than we ever imagined. The weeks that followed established new rhythms in my life. Mornings at Harlow Technologies, reviewing applications of the encryption technology through the Ethics Committee's newly established frameworks. Evening video calls with the twins, hearing about their MIT classes, their new friends, their adjustment to college life. Weekends in my studio, painting more than I had in years, the creative energy flowing from the intellectual stimulation of my new role. Alexander and I settled into a cautiously professional relationship, our interactions focused primarily on the Ethics Committee's work and the development of the transition plan away from surveillance technologies. He respected my boundaries, never presuming a personal connection beyond our shared history and co-parenting relationship. Protocol 0, once I was fully briefed on its technical specifications, proved to be even more significant than Valencia had indicated. It wasn't merely a modified version of our original encryption system, it was a fundamental reimagining that incorporated 16 years of technological advancement while returning to our founding principle of privacy by design. This would make governmental backdoor access mathematically impossible, I observed during a technical review session with Alexander and his development team. Not just difficult or regulated, but structurally impossible. That's correct, he confirmed. While maintaining all legitimate security functions for commercial applications. The government contracts would have to be terminated or fundamentally restructured, I pointed out. There's no middle ground with this implementation. He nodded, his expression serious. Hence the carefully planned transition period. We need to fulfill existing contractual obligations while preparing clients and markets for the change. As I studied the elegant mathematics underlying Protocol 0, I recognized echoes of our original work together at MIT, the theoretical foundations we'd established as graduate students, now evolved through years of practical application and technological advancement. It was like hearing a complex symphony built from a melody we'd once composed together. There's something of both of us in this, I said without thinking. Of our original collaboration. Alexander looked up, surprised and something softer flickering across his features. Yes, he acknowledged quietly. That was intentional. I wanted to reconnect with the principles we established together, the balance of security and privacy we originally envisioned. The moment felt unexpectedly intimate, a recognition of our intellectual connection that had survived 16 years of separation, betrayal, and reconciliation. Whatever else had happened between us, our minds still worked in complementary patterns, still recognized and appreciated the elegance in each other's thinking. As October approached, bringing with it MIT's Parents' Weekend, I found myself preparing for the dinner Alexander had arranged with unexpected anticipation. The twins had settled well at university, their video calls filled with excitement about classes, research opportunities, and the vibrant intellectual community they'd found there. Alexander picked me up the Friday afternoon of Parents' Weekend, his driving as precise and confident as everything else he did. We maintained comfortable conversation during the drive to Boston, discussing committee progress, the twins' academic updates, and the Foundation's first round of scholarship recipients. We've selected 12 students for the initial cohort, I told him. The announcement goes out next week. Excellent, he replied, genuine enthusiasm in his voice. Will the twins be involved in the announcement? They've recorded a video introduction, I confirmed. They're taking ownership of this project in a way that's impressed me. They're remarkable people, Arya, Alexander said softly. You did an extraordinary job raising them. The simple praise, offered without qualification or self-pity about his own absence, touched me unexpectedly. Thank you, I said. They make it easy to be proud of them. We arrived at MIT as afternoon light gilded the campus buildings. The twins met us outside their dorm, both looking slightly more mature than they had just 2 months ago when we dropped them off, college already working its transformative magic on their transition to adulthood. Our dinner at Catalyst was unlike any meal we'd shared before. Relaxed, joyful, filled with the twins' animated descriptions of their classes, their professors, the research projects they hoped to join. For the first time, the four of us felt almost like a normal family, the awkwardness of our unusual situation temporarily overshadowed by the simple pleasure of being together. Professor Ramirez has already invited me to join her game theory research group next semester, Mira told us, barely containing her excitement. She's doing groundbreaking work on incentive structures in digital ecosystems. That's wonderful, Alexander replied, his pride evident. She's a leading thinker in the field. And Ethan has news too, Mira prompted, nudging her brother. He shrugged, affecting nonchalance, though I could see his suppressed excitement. I've been asked to join the Quantum Computing Lab's encryption team. They're working on some interesting applications of our foundation's scholarship model for a distributed computer project. Our foundation, I noted, hearing the subtle ownership in his words. The project you and Mira designed. Ethan smiled slightly. It turns out that structuring educational support systems has applications beyond just scholarships. The same framework can be used for distributed research contribution incentives. Alexander leaned forward, genuine interest in his expression. How so? As Ethan explained the technical connection between their scholarship selection algorithm and the distributed computing incentive structure, I watched father and son engage in the kind of deep intellectual exchange that had once characterized my relationship with Alexander. The similarity in how their minds worked, in how they approached problems and built solutions, was striking. Mira caught my eye across the table, a small smile playing on her lips. She'd noticed it too, this emerging connection between her brother and their father, built on shared intellectual passion rather than mere biological relationship. After dinner, the twins showed us around campus, pointing out their favorite study spots, the labs where they spent most of their time, the coffee shop where they met between classes. Watching them navigate this new environment with confidence and enthusiasm eased the ache of their absence from home. As we prepared to say goodbye for the evening, Alexander and I would return the following day for official parents' weekend activities. Mira pulled me aside while Ethan and Alexander continued discussing a technical point from dinner. "He's really trying, Mom," she said quietly, nodding toward Alexander. "With us, with the company transition, with everything." "I know," I acknowledged. "He's not who I thought he was. Or rather, he's more complicated than I allowed myself to see." She studied me with those perceptive eyes that missed nothing. "And how do you feel about that?" "Confused," I admitted. "The anger I held onto for 16 years doesn't quite fit anymore. But trust doesn't come easily after that kind of betrayal." She nodded, accepting my honesty. "Just don't let the past blind you to who he is now," she advised. "The good or the bad. When did you become so wise?" I asked, echoing my earlier question to Ethan. She smiled slightly. "Probably around the time I started watching you navigate impossible situations with grace and courage. We learn what we live, Mom." Her words stayed with me during the drive back to our hotel, echoing alongside memories of the evening, the easy conversation, the intellectual engagement, the glimpses of the family we might have been under different circumstances. Alexander and I had booked separate rooms, maintaining appropriate boundaries despite our co-parenting relationship. As we reached my door, he paused, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you for today, Arya," he said simply. "For allowing me to share this experience with you and the twins." "They're your children too, Alexander," I reminded him. "You have every right to be here." "Because you made it possible," he countered gently. "You could have kept them from me, even after finding me. Many people would have, given what happened between us." The acknowledgement of my choice, of the generosity he perceived in it, created a moment of unexpected connection between us. "They deserve to know you," I said finally. "And you deserve to know them. Whatever happened between us, that was always true." He nodded, accepting this framing of my decision. "Still, thank you." As he turned to continue down the hallway to his own room, I spoke impulsively. "Alexander?" He paused, looking back questioningly. "Would you like to have breakfast tomorrow, before we meet the twins? There are some Protocol Zero modifications I've been considering that I'd like to discuss." His expression brightened with genuine pleasure. "I'd like that very much." As I entered my room and closed the door behind me, I acknowledged the subtle shift that had occurred not just in my professional assessment of Alexander Harlow, but in my personal willingness to engage with him beyond the minimum required by our shared responsibilities. The man who had betrayed me 16 years ago and the man who had spent 3 years secretly developing technology to correct that betrayal were the same person, complex, flawed, capable of both selfishness and redemption. Perhaps it was time to allow for that complexity, to see him not as the villain in my personal history but as a human being whose choices, like my own, reflected both weakness and strength. If you've ever had to revise your understanding of someone who hurt you, finding room for both accountability and forgiveness, comment both truth below. Sometimes the hardest people to see clearly are the ones who've touched our hearts most deeply. The following weeks brought new challenges as the Ethics Committee began its formal review of Harlow Technologies' existing government contracts. The process was methodical but emotionally taxing, each review session revealing applications of our technology that contradicted its original purpose in increasingly troubling ways. One particularly difficult meeting focused on a surveillance system deployed in several countries with questionable human rights records. The technical documentation revealed capabilities far beyond what any public disclosures had suggested, including predictive monitoring of potential political dissidents based on communication patterns and association mapping. "This is fundamentally incompatible with our stated principles," Dr. Washington declared, her normally measured tone edged with genuine anger. "It's not just about privacy intrusion. This system could be used to target vulnerable populations, to suppress legitimate political expression." "I agree," I said firmly. "This crosses every ethical line we've established." The committee's unanimous recommendation was unequivocal: immediate termination of the contracts, disabled system access, and technical assistance for transition to more limited security applications that respected basic privacy rights. When we presented our findings to Alexander, I watched his face carefully, looking for signs of resistance or corporate equivocation. Instead, I saw grim acknowledgement that he had known what we would find, had anticipated our response. "I'll begin the termination process immediately," he said without hesitation. "The legal team is prepared with the necessary documentation. There will be significant financial implications," Marcus Johnson pointed out. "These contracts represent substantial annual revenue." "Yes," Alexander agreed simply. "There will be. We'll manage them." His unqualified acceptance of the committee's recommendation, despite the business consequences, surprised even the most skeptical committee members. As they filed out after the meeting, Dr. Washington lingered briefly. "I've worked with dozens of tech companies on ethical reviews," she told me quietly. "I've never seen a CEO accept recommendations with such immediate commitment, especially when they impact the bottom line so significantly." After she left, Alexander and I remained in the conference room, the weight of the decision hanging between us. It was one thing to talk about transitioning away from problematic contracts in principle, another to begin the actual process of dismantling major revenue streams. "Thank you," I said finally, "for respecting the committee's authority." "That was always the intention," he replied. "To create genuine oversight, not a facade of ethical consideration. Even when it costs millions." He met my gaze directly. "Especially then. That's when principles matter most, when they require real sacrifice." Something shifted between us in that moment, a recognition that despite our complicated history, despite the betrayal that had separated us for 16 years, we shared a fundamental understanding of what mattered most. Money, success, influence, all secondary to the integrity of the work itself, to its impact on the world. The twins came home for Thanksgiving break a few weeks later, filling our small house with energy and stories from their first semester at MIT. Alexander joined us for dinner, a tentative new tradition we were building, this holiday celebration that acknowledged our unconventional family structure without pretending away its complications. As we finished the meal, Mira cleared her throat, exchanging a glance with Ethan before speaking. "We have something to tell you both," she announced. My heart stuttered briefly. What news could they have that required such formal declaration? "We've been working on an independent project at MIT," Ethan explained. "Using some of the concepts from Protocol Zero that Dad shared with us, combined with distributed computing principles from our scholarship algorithm." Alexander leaned forward, interest evident in his expression. "What kind of project?" "A public interface for Protocol Zero," Mira continued. "A way to implement its privacy protections without requiring complete replacement of existing systems." I looked between them, understanding dawning. "You found a transition mechanism?" Ethan nodded, a hint of pride breaking through his usual reserve. "A bridge implementation that would allow gradual adoption of the full protocol while immediately disabling the most problematic surveillance capabilities. We think it could accelerate the company's transition timeline from years to months," Mira added, "without triggering the contractual penalties of immediate termination." Alexander and I exchanged glances, both recognizing the brilliance of their approach. They had found a technical solution to what we had framed as a primarily business and legal challenge typical of their generation's approach to seemingly intractable problems. This is... Alexander began, then paused, visibly moved by their initiative. This is extraordinary work. May we see the technical specifications? The twins presented their project after dinner, walking us through the elegant mathematics and systems architecture they developed. The solution was remarkable in its simplicity once you understood the underlying principles, a characteristic of truly innovative thinking. You've essentially created a transitional layer, I observed, studying their diagrams. One that maintains contractual compliance while gradually implementing the full privacy protections. Exactly, Ethan confirmed. It satisfies the letter of the agreements while beginning to restore the spirit of the original technology. As the twins continued their explanation, I watched Alexander's face, the pride, the genuine intellectual engagement, but also something deeper, more personal. This wasn't just about an elegant technical solution. This was about his children choosing to engage with his greatest professional mistake and finding a path toward redemption. Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Alexander and I sat in my small living room, processing what they had shown us. They're remarkable, he said softly. The way they approached this problem, seeing possibilities where we saw only constraints. They get that from both of us, I acknowledged. Your technical brilliance, my stubbornness about finding better solutions. He smiled slightly at this characterization. They've taken the best of both and created something better than either of us might have alone. The observation hung between us, laden with implications about what might have been if we'd stayed together, if we'd built Harlow Technologies as the partnership we'd originally planned. I'm sorry, Arya, he said suddenly, his voice quiet but intense. I know I've said it before, but watching them tonight, seeing what they've created, how their minds work. I'm sorry for everything I took from us. From you. From them. The simple sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't a calculated apology or strategic expression of regret. This was genuine remorse from a man finally seeing the full consequences of choices made 16 years ago. Thank you, I said after a moment. For seeing it. For acknowledging it. He nodded, accepting the limited acceptance I offered. Will you let them present their solution to the development team? He asked, returning to more comfortable professional territory. It could genuinely transform our transition timeline. Of course, I agreed. They've earned that opportunity through the quality of their work, not their relationship to us. As Alexander prepared to leave, he paused at the door, his expression thoughtful. The twins have shown us a path forward for the technology, he observed. Perhaps there's a lesson there for us as well. Meaning? That sometimes the most difficult transitions require unexpected bridges, he said quietly. Ways to honor contractual obligations while moving towards something better aligned with our true principles. The parallel to our personal situation wasn't subtle, but neither was it presumptuous. He was acknowledging the complicated reality of our relationship bound by shared children and professional collaboration, yet still carrying the weight of past betrayal. Perhaps, I acknowledged, neither accepting nor rejecting the implicit suggestion. Good night, Alexander. Good night, Arya, he replied, stepping into the November chill. As I closed the door behind him, I leaned against it, processing the events of the evening. The twins' brilliant solution to the Protocol Zero implementation challenge. Alexander's genuine remorse for his past choices. The gradual shift in how I perceived him, no longer just the man who had betrayed me, but a complex individual capable of both significant error and meaningful redemption. Was there indeed a transitional path for us, as there was for the technology? A bridge between our complicated past and some new configuration that honored both what had been broken and what remained unbroken between us. If you believe that sometimes the most important relationships in our lives are the ones that require us to grow beyond our comfortable understandings of forgiveness and reconciliation, comment New Bridges below. The hardest journeys often lead to the most meaningful destinations. December brought accelerated developments both professionally and personally. The Twins Transition Protocol, now formally incorporated into Harlow Technologies' development roadmap, had energized the company's technical teams and provided a concrete implementation plan for the ethical shift we've been advocating. Board members who had initially resisted the transition away from lucrative government contracts found themselves reassured by the measured approach. The new protocol enabled maintaining revenue stability while gradually implementing the stronger privacy protections that Alexander and I had originally envisioned. More surprising was the public response when Alexander announced the initiative at a major technology conference. Rather than focusing on the potential revenue implications, the market embraced the company's recommitment to privacy-enhancing technologies. Harlow Technologies stock actually increased following the announcement, confounding analysts who had predicted negative impact. The Ethics Committee continued its methodical review of existing applications, prioritizing the most problematic contracts for early transition. Each successful implementation strengthened my confidence in the process we'd established and in Alexander's genuine commitment to change. As Christmas approached, the twins returned from their triumphant first semester at MIT, both having earned perfect grades while simultaneously developing their transitional protocol and maintaining involvement with the Foundation's scholarship program. "We're considering expanding the Foundation's focus," Mira announced during dinner one evening. "Beyond just educational support to include privacy advocacy and digital rights education. That's a significant expansion of scope," I observed. "What prompted it?" "Our work on the transition protocol," Ethan explained. "We realized that technical solutions alone aren't sufficient. There's a fundamental education gap about digital privacy rights and how technologies like ours impact them." Alexander, who had joined us for dinner as had become our custom when the twins were home, nodded thoughtfully. "That aligns well with the company's evolving mission. We could provide resources, technical expertise. The Foundation should maintain its independence," Mira cautioned. "But yes, appropriate collaboration would make sense." I watched this exchange with quiet pride as my children discussed complex ethical and strategic considerations with confidence and clarity, engaging with their father as intellectual equals despite the vast difference in age and experience. Later that evening, after the twins had gone out with friends, Alexander helped me clean up the kitchen, falling into the domestic rhythm we'd gradually established during his regular visits. "They've adjusted well to knowing me," he observed, carefully loading the dishwasher. "To incorporating me into their lives." "They're adaptable," I replied. "And you've been respectful of boundaries, patient with their process. That's helped." He nodded, accepting this assessment. "And you?" He glanced at me briefly before returning his attention to the dishes. "How have you adjusted to having me back in your life?" The direct question caught me off guard. We'd maintained a carefully professional relationship despite our frequent interactions, focusing on the twins, the company transition, the shared work rather than our personal history. "It's been complicated," I admitted. "Reconciling the man who left 16 years ago with the person you are now. Seeing both the continuity and the changes." He accepted this honest assessment without defense. "And what do you see, Arya? When you look at who I am now?" I considered the question carefully, owing him the same honesty he'd shown in acknowledging his past mistakes. "Someone more thoughtful than the young man I knew," I said finally. "Someone who recognizes the consequences of his choices and takes responsibility for them. Someone trying to align his actions with his values, however imperfectly." He looked genuinely moved by this assessment, more affected than I'd expected. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For seeing the effort, not just the failures." We finished cleaning in companionable silence, the winter evening wrapping around my small house with its comfortable familiarity. As Alexander prepared to leave, he hesitated in the entryway. "I have a proposal," he said carefully. "A professional one." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. "The transition implementation is moving faster than anticipated, thanks to the twins protocol. We need stronger leadership of privacy-centered development going forward." He met my gaze directly. I'd like you to consider a co-CEO position, focusing specifically on the ethical implementation of our technology while I handle the business operations. The suggestion was so unexpected I couldn't immediately process it. Co-CEO. Alexander, that's a recognition of your rightful role, he interrupted gently. As the co-creator of our foundational technology. As the ethical voice that I lost sight of for too many years. He paused. The board has already approved the concept, contingent on your acceptance. I shook my head, overwhelmed by the proposal. This is a lot to consider, Alexander. A significant change from my current role. Take all the time you need, he assured me. It's not a decision to make lightly. But I wanted you to know that the option exists, not just a board seat or committee chair, but equal leadership of the company we should have built together from the beginning. As he left, his proposal lingered in the air like a reimagining of history, not erasing what had happened, but offering a new path forward that acknowledged both the past betrayal and the possibility of a different future. Christmas morning found the three of us, Mira, Ethan, and I, continuing our long-established traditions. Cinnamon rolls for breakfast, gifts opened one at a time, music playing softly in the background. Alexander had been invited to join us later for dinner, a careful expansion of our family circle that respected our established bonds while making space for new connections. Among the twins' gifts to me was a small, elegantly wrapped box that contained a simple silver pendant. The design looked familiar somehow, though I couldn't immediately place it. It's the core equation, Ethan explained. From your original algorithm with Dad. The foundation of everything that came after. We had it custom designed, Mira added. The jeweler thought we were crazy with our precise mathematical specifications. I held the pendant, emotion tightening my throat as I recognized the elegant mathematics rendered in silver, the breakthrough equation Alexander and I had developed together as graduate students, the insight that had launched his company and shaped all our lives in ways we could never have anticipated. It's beautiful, I finally managed. Thank you. We thought it might help you remember, Ethan said quietly. When things get complicated with the company transition. That the work itself was always good, always valuable. Whatever happened afterward. My brilliant, perceptive son, seeing to the heart of my ongoing struggle to separate the work Alexander and I had created together from the betrayal that had followed it. When Alexander arrived for dinner, he brought thoughtful gifts for each of us, practical but personal items that showed his growing understanding of our individual interests and needs. For the twins, advanced technical tools related to their MIT studies. For me, a set of rare pigments I'd once mentioned using in my artwork, nearly impossible to find commercially. The evening unfolded with surprising ease, conversation flowing naturally, shared jokes, discussions of the foundation's expansion plans and the company's transition progress. We were not a conventional family, but we had found our own rhythm, our own way of being connected despite our complicated history. As we finished dessert, Alexander cleared his throat slightly. I have something for all of us, he said, placing an envelope on the table. If you're interested. Mira reached for it first, always the most directly curious. Inside were reservation confirmations for a house in Aspen during spring break, a vacation property with sufficient space for privacy but common areas for shared activities. I thought perhaps we could spend some time together, away from school and work pressures, he explained, his tone carefully neutral. Completely optional, of course. Separate accommodations for everyone. Just an opportunity for family time, Ethan finished for him, the words still carrying a hint of tentativeness when applied to the four of us together. Yes, Alexander confirmed. If that's something you'd all welcome. The twins looked to me, allowing me to establish the boundary. A week together in Aspen represented a significant step beyond our current careful arrangement of occasional dinners and holiday gatherings. I think that sounds lovely, I said finally, recognizing the importance of this continued careful building of connections. The twins will need a break after their intense first year at MIT. The genuine pleasure that crossed Alexander's features confirmed that this invitation was not about luxury or display, but about the simple human desire for connection, for time together without the pressures of work or school or complicated histories. Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed and Alexander had returned to his hotel, I sat in my studio examining the silver pendant they had given me. The elegant equation that had brought Alexander and me together, torn us apart, and now, improbably, reunited us in this new configuration, business partners again, co-parents to our remarkable children, and something else not easily defined. I fastened the pendant around my neck, the weight of it settling against my skin like a reminder of what had been lost, yes, but also of what remained unbroken. The value of the work itself, the brilliance we had shared, the children we had created, each in their own way carrying forward the best of both of us. Whatever came next, the co-CEO position Alexander had proposed, the spring break in Aspen, the continuing evolution of our complex relationship would be approached with the same careful consideration, the same balancing of past and future, of caution and possibility. 16 years ago, an invitation had changed everything, bringing Alexander Harlow back into my life and revealing the children he'd never known existed. Now, new invitations were being extended, professional, personal, familial, each representing a choice about how to move forward, how to honor both what had been broken and what remained whole between us. The silver pendant caught the light as I moved, the mathematics that had once changed the world now transformed into something personal, something meaningful beyond its technical elegance. Perhaps there was a lesson in that transformation, that even the most painful parts of our histories could be recast into something valuable, something worth carrying forward. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories for more powerful tales of family, forgiveness, and finding your way home. Like and share this video if you believe that some journeys, no matter how difficult, are worth taking, especially those that lead us back to the people who help us become our better selves. Because in the end, the most valuable things we create aren't measured in billions or counted in patents. They're found in the connections we forge, the truths we honor, and the bridges we build, not just to the future we want, but to the people who help us become who we were always meant to be.